Gareth from Be Digital here. We have a brilliant show for you this time around. This individual, a really sort of driven entrepreneur, he got into the affiliate marketing boom in the 90s, did really well out of it, always wanted to create a business and put his energy behind one brand, and that brand was money.co.uk, which he grew over a 10-year period between 2008 right up to a successful exit in 2018. And couldn't stay away from it for very long, though. Straight back into the deep end with his current venture, Studee.com. They enable students to, or provide a support network for students who want to study abroad through their partnership program. Massive sort of emphasis on sustainability, social responsibility. It's a really unique business with a great model and a great future. Lots of value, lots of great anecdotes, a brilliant interview. I give you Chris Morling. Chris, much appreciated.
My pleasure.
We've driven down here to Cirencester to meet you in your new offices. You've been here, 3 weeks?
3 months.
3 months, excuse
me. You wouldn't guess that from the decor, but yes, 3 months.
Right in the middle of Cirencester, which is a lovely little town, by the way. I don't think I've been here for a long time. And you've obviously set up a really exciting new enterprise, which we'll come on to in due course. But first of all, I think it would be great to find out a little bit more about Chris and the journey you've been on to this point, because I know you've had a very colourful and successful lead up to setting up this venture. Mm-hmm. So maybe in the first instance, if you just tell us a little bit about your initial journey from point of leaving education up to setting up money.co.uk.
Sure, yeah, no problem at all. So I studied electronics at Manchester University. Very quickly realised that was far too difficult, so I went into computing, and that was my career basically for 9 years. I was an engineer, although we didn't call them engineers back then, and worked for several different companies, Capgemini, Oracle, an insurance software house. And the kicker for starting up my own business in what was 99 was I was running a training course in Budapest for Oracle, because they ran all their courses out there, because back then it was tax efficient. And part of that process, I had to learn all the different languages before I taught them. And in order to do that, I had to learn how to create websites. And so that's how I initially learned how to write a website. And in the process of learning, I created this little website called Finance Link. I don't remember why, but it was a financial directory. And that was the starting point, really. I was spending all my time writing this website. I think my wife was getting a bit frustrated that I wasn't really focused on my career. And I remember being sat down with her one evening, and I think she was trying to sort of buck my ideas up. She said, well, why don't you just leave Oracle then and just crack on with this thing? So I did it next morning, 9 o'clock, went in and resigned. She bought me a laptop because I couldn't afford one. I ordered some high-speed 56k modem so I could work from home, and off I went. So I started the business on my own, worked for 2 years before I employed anyone. Wow. And I actually met Simon in the first office I shared. So after 6 months of working from home and going a bit stir crazy, I moved into an office with a friend and this random bloke, Simon, who is now my business partner. And we shared an office up by London Bridge for about 6 years. A really cheap as chips place, only cost a couple of grand.
So it was just you and Simon at this point then?
And this other friend, Will.
Well, right, okay.
And we were about 3 feet away from the railway line. So as the trains went past, our coffee cups would judder across the desk. I mean, it was ridiculous, classic startup stuff.
What kind of roles did the three of you have then?
Well, so I should have made clear, we were running our own businesses, so we weren't working together. So Simon was working in education, and he was focused on graduate recruitment. Right. I was focused on a whole range of different random websites because it was the start of affiliate marketing days. And my friend Will, anything he could get his hands into. We had crates of beer in the office because he had a Books for Beer initiative where he was helping students swap their books in return for beer. Crazy stuff. Anyway, so I started off in the affiliate marketing and created about 50 different websites, selling third-party services and getting paid for them. But it paid well. It did really well. After 4 years of myself and one employee, we had an EBITDA of well over $1 million, which enabled me to build the business without ever having to get funding or investment or any debt, which is a bit of a challenge these days. But I quickly realised that it's not very rewarding, throwing up a website and almost just jumping in and being a conduit is not the same as adding value. And so we started creating what I'd call proper websites of real value that actually helped the users. Yeah. We had one of the biggest baby websites out there, pre-Mumsnet, called Ask Baby. It was the third largest out there at the time. Had a massive forum. But we decided not to continue with that because I got to a point I just wanted to focus on one project in order to make it amazing, rather than 50 projects that just kind of festered along. Yeah. So that's why in 2008 we brought together about 30 financial websites we had at the time and created a single website.
I'm assuming they came from other places as well.
They were websites that we had created ourselves. And each one focused on a different financial product.
Right.
So we had one for credit cards, one for loans, one for
And they were aggregators predominantly, yeah?
Yes.
Right.
And we brought all those together under one umbrella, called it aboutyourmoney.co.uk. Realised that was a bad name. And that's when I started searching for
what sort of year was this then?
So this was this was about 2006 that we brought all those websites under one umbrella. Yeah. And then it was 2008 when I bought the domain money.co.uk.
That must have been quite expensive even then.
Yeah, it was 300k.
Wow.
So, a worthwhile investment in the end. But
did you have anyone telling you at that point, what are you doing?
Oh, plenty. Yeah, you can imagine.
In other words, were you married at that point?
Well, I think I had plenty of people saying, what the hell are you doing, all the way through my first 5-6 years of running my own business.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, so then 2008, we created Money, introduced whole of market products, basically made it a much better experience for users. And then we had a brand we could start working on, which was the difference. Before it was just disparate websites no one could remember. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you've got a brilliant competitive advantage there, building a brand with such an enormous sort of keyword domain name,
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because that's what I thought at the time. But then over time I realised, well, actually it's a bit of a crap name. It's brilliant in terms of eliciting trust. Because I think people just assume, well, there's no way you could have that domain unless you've got something behind you.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not really a name that you can build a brand on well, because there's nothing about it. I much prefer having something a little bit more sort of generic that you can just add.
Yeah, it sounds very institutional, doesn't it? I mean, if you were to say who owns money.co.uk, the domain name, you'd probably say probably like one of the big banks or something, or the government or something, wouldn't you? So, yeah, I don't know. So that didn't really work in your favour in the early part.
I think it definitely did, as I said, in terms of eliciting trust. But I think it made it more difficult for us to build a brand around.
A unique brand.
A unique brand, with a personality.
I understand, yeah.
Because it just doesn't lend itself to that.
Just going on the money.co.uk thing then, so you talked us up until the point of purchasing the domain name.
Yes.
And the early challenges you had with that. So talk us through the rest of that journey right through to the point of exit.
Sure. So we were quite a small team for a good few years. I ran money.co.uk with a team of 8 for, I think it was at least 3-4 years. And I wouldn't say it was a lifestyle business because we were incredibly successful, very profitable. Everybody was happy in their work. Nobody left the company. Everyone loved what we were doing. But I think it was simply down to a lack of ambition on my part that meant I didn't push it further. So we kind of almost ticked along for those years. And it was only when I think I just literally had a change of mindset and a realisation that, no, we can take on the big boys. We can take on Money Supermarket and the like. And it was only when I did that we then started accelerating what we were doing, and I started to grow the business in terms of growing the team, being more adventurous in what we were trying to achieve. We moved to a beautiful office the other side of Cirencester. It's a Victorian barracks that looks like a castle.
I've heard about this place.
And yeah, we renovated it, and it got a lot of accolade. It was voted one of the top 10 places to work in the world in terms of an office space.
Is it true that you had a Star Wars room there? Or was that just a nasty room?
Yes, it was all the essentials. We had a Star Wars cinema. But as ridiculous as it sounds, and it was based on the Death Star. It did double up as a presentation room, so it wasn't just a crazy room used in the evenings. We did use it as a presentation room with a fantastic massive screen and so on. But yeah, it was a bit quirky. So when we moved to those offices, started to grow the numbers. I mean, we were always a small team. Even when I sold, it was only a team of 63. But definitely a change of mindset and a change of long-term focus completely shifted the business.
Right.
So I, being perfectly open, I'd say we were more reactive in the early days of money.co.uk.
Yeah.
Whereas we were able to grow and really push by the obvious planning ahead and thinking about what is it we want to deliver, what are the priorities, etc.
Okay.
All the stuff that a lot of people worth their salt would know and understand when they started their business. It took me a few years to work this one out.
Well, I suppose it's a journey, isn't it? You
Yeah,
try
absolutely.
and error, and you work these things out as you go along a lot of the time. What technology challenges did you face to build the platform that you wanted to build?
So right at the start, I chose MySQL PHP platform, which is free. That was my driver. But fortunately, it's been developed substantially over the years, and so it continued to be made. It was fit for purpose throughout the money.co.uk years, and in fact, it's the underlying tech that we use now. I mean, the key challenge was clearly to ensure that we had a fast service, that the website continued to be lightning fast, and also scalable. And by the time that we got to that point, it was out of my hands and passed on to somebody far more knowledgeable and experienced than me, who looked after that. So I couldn't tell you the technical ins and outs. All I could tell you is that it was something that was front of mind and something that we were constantly working on to ensure that we maintained.
Yeah. What about regulatory challenges? Because you were in the midst of a lot of stuff going on in the background with responsible lending and all this kind of business. A lot of financial services companies were getting hit hard around the time that you were trying to scale this.
Yes.
What sort of affected that? How about you?
Yeah, so there were a considerable number of changes in terms of regulation. I mean, GDPR being one that affects not just financial industry, although perhaps more than some, but also, yes, within the debt industry. I mean, payday loans is one that springs to mind. And we had to make on a business front, we had to make quite a serious decision. Do we want to compare payday loans, or do we feel that this is not going to help our customers ultimately? We made the decision that at the end of the day, consumers are looking for payday loans, and that's proven just by looking at the stats and the searches on Google. So they are going to be finding something when they make those searches. So do we want to be in the mix and guiding them in the right direction, telling them the better alternatives, but if they're convinced that's what they want, at least allowing them to compare and find the best of what's available, even if it is within a bucket of products that are not ideal. And that's a decision we ultimately made. We made it very clear at the top of all our payday loan comparisons, these are not great, and I'm paraphrasing, but these are not great. You should try and seek anything else if you possibly can. Here are links to other resources, but if you really want one, this is what the market is offering. Yeah,
it's a big topic, isn't it, for aggregate? How much responsibility do aggregators have? And because at the end of the day, though, I think as an aggregator, your responsibility is to give your user sort of access to the market. What the market looks like can't be your responsibility, surely. I mean, it's just more a case of this is what the market has. I don't know. Did you have a moral, ethical conversation at the time?
100%. Yeah. I mean, numerous, and
there were a lot of sharky lenders out there at the time, wasn't there? They probably still are.
Yeah, absolutely. And those really sharky lenders we didn't include on the site.
Right.
And to be fair, we got better and better at tightening up our requirements for listing.
So you had due diligence with these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. We were ahead of the curve in terms of, our requirements were more stringent than, what was dictated by, the regulatory boards, etc. But yeah, no, it was an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
As I explained, those are the reasons why we continue to promote them. But we also got quite heavily involved with giving our feedback to the government and so on what we felt was important. Things such as being transparent on charges and pricing, etc., because they were hidden.
Small print.
Completely, and that's what we were trying to surface.
Yeah.
Take one of these out, be aware of this, and this.
Yeah.
If you don't pay back within 30 days, you're going to be stung for this.
Right. So you
make people aware.
Right. Okay. So you went out of your way to try and highlight this stuff when your users were going through your platform.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Culture then, in terms of what, the whole thing with money.co.uk, well, what kind of culture did you build there? What did you set out to build and what did you end up with?
I wanted to build a place where people wanted to work. And I think we achieved that. When you run a business, it's your baby and it's everything to you. And it's very, very easy, I think, to get wrapped up in this notion that it's just as important to everybody else in the business. Mm. And I just don't think that's true. And I think it's really important to take a step back and realise that although the business is important and should be important to your employees and they should care about it, there are other things that are more important, namely family, friends,
absolutely,
and your life. And work-life balance is absolutely key. I've never been a fan of a work-late culture. I don't think it helps anybody in the long term. So those are all the things that were front of mind when building, the values and how we worked at Money. And it's the sort of stuff that we brought in to Studee as well. But it's lots and lots of things. It's how you set up your working environment, flexible working hours, being able to work from home, all these things that are just driven off the basis of trust.
So you had flexi time from the beginning in money.co.uk?
No, we introduced it during. We constantly reviewed what we were doing, and I like to think we got better and better at realising what mattered to our team, and subsequently making the changes. So it's something we introduced, several years before I sold.
Yeah.
But well after the business started.
What's the biggest lesson you learned from that experience of money.co.uk in terms of the whole thing, from starting it to exit? What was the biggest lesson you learned which you took forward to Studee, to setting up Studee?
There's quite a few. I mean, one that really stands out, and again, this might be obvious to a lot of people, but it's working backwards. So, as I mean,
like reverse engineering things?
No. So what I mean is, I mentioned before that when I started out, it was very reactive. It was almost, what shall I do today? Oh, that's nice and shiny. I'll do that.
Right. Yeah.
Not really planning ahead. So what I mean by working backwards is, what is it we're trying to achieve? What are we here? What are we trying to deliver? Right now we have a 3-year plan. I don't go beyond that because I think things change. And you almost be wasting your time. So we have a 3-year plan and then work backwards from that. That's what we want to achieve within 3 years.
Yeah.
What does that mean for this year? Okay, what does that mean for this quarter? Okay, teams, what does that mean for you within your teams? What do you need to deliver in that quarter to deliver for the business? And so everything's about working backwards. And that way you know that everything you do across the whole business is a stepping stone to achieving your 3-year goal as a business.
Yes.
And it keeps everybody tightly focused on the right stuff and everybody understands their priorities.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest change now from when I started Money.
How detailed do you get with that plan? You know what I mean? Do you literally plan anything down? Do you fine tune it to the
it's a good question. We use OKRs, which is a framework that I believe is used by Google and a lot of other businesses. Objectives and key results. So we define what we want to achieve by the end of the year and in each quarter. How that is achieved is down to the individual teams and the individuals within those teams.
Yeah.
So for example, we might say, we want to have 1,000 universities on the website by the end of the year, which is one of our objectives. And then that is then broken down at the relevant point when you start working on it. So we never look more than a quarter ahead in terms of how we're going to deliver. but we understand what it is we're going to deliver well in advance. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, I understand. So it's kind of like the Stephen Covey start with the end in mind sort of premise, isn't it?
Exactly, it's just a slightly different framework, yes.
So just going back onto the chronology then, so obviously you exited, and then there was a little bit of time before you set up your current venture. Talk us through the immediate aftermath of the exit and what you did in between.
Sure, yeah, so there wasn't really an in-between in the end. So yes, I sold in 2018, and I was quite lucky. There was just a 1 year earn-out clause that I had to continue working as director. So during that period, that's when I had discussions and chats with my friend Simon, because I was a small shareholder in his previous business.
So just to be clear, Simon Andrews is the co-founder of Studee.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yes,
okay.
He's my business partner now. So, I mean, I had that decision to make. What do I do next? Do I start something fresh and new? Do I become an angel investor? Do I take some time out? Do I get really good at golf? None of those things really appealed. And it was when I had a conversation with Simon, it was like a light bulb moment, because I just thought it was so exciting. Yeah, so he almost made the decision easy for me, in that he told me about what he was doing, and I just instantly realised where we could take it. And so it was literally within a matter of weeks of a conversation, we went from, Simon went from, this is what I'm doing, to, right, we're going to make this happen, we're going to work together, and we're going to create something amazing, and this is the direction we're going to take it in.
Right.
And that happened during my earn-out time. So I had lots of chats with Simon during that period. So almost immediately after finishing at Money as a director, it was literally finish in the castle on the Friday, and then I was in an office with Simon on a Monday. Really? And cracking on.
You weren't tempted to go and sit on the beach for a couple of months?
I do remember having a chat with a good friend of mine and saying, I'm going to take every Friday off at the very least.
Sounds like
and I'm going to send you a photo every Friday from what I'm doing, all the fun I'm having. And the first Friday I had off, and I just in a pub with my wife, having a nice lunch, nothing dramatic, but very relaxing. Sent him a smug photo. And that's the last photo I ever sent, because the next Friday I was working, and then I was back in it, because I love it.
You love it, yeah. Well, that's, can't keep a good man away, I suppose. But I think, you obviously must have had some interest in the education sector, or was it purely down to Simon? You must have thought about this before, but you must have had some preconceived ideas behind what you potentially could do with Simon when you were at money.co.uk. Is that the case? Yeah,
massively, although this is very much, it's a different direction to what I thought I'd take. So, I mean, I was ingrained in the whole education. My whole family are teachers. My father, my mother, my uncle, my other uncle, my godfather, I mean, literally everybody.
It's in the blood then.
It's in the blood, and that's why I don't work in that career, because I realise that it's far too much like hard work. My father worked all hours. So, it's ingrained in me. But where the direction I thought I'd be going is more looking at how we can improve education in schools, because that's something else I feel quite passionately about. I don't think we've got the right structure for teaching kids in school. Yeah. It's all focused on memorising and not creativity. At a very high level.
It's so strange though, because I interviewed Jason Maud from Starling Bank just the other day, and he was talking about this exact thing, and he was referring back to Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk, which is quite a famous one.
It is, yeah.
About how we beat the creativity out of children from a young age and essentially train them to become good factory workers, because that was what we needed 200 years ago, and we haven't really changed it since then, have we? Which is bizarre.
I completely agree with that. And I've got 3 kids going through the education system now. Don't get me wrong, they have a fantastic education insofar as they learn all the basics, and it's a great grounding in your life knowledge. But I think they could do so much more.
Oh, absolutely.
And not just what they learn, but how they learn.
Absolutely. Have you looked at the Finland case study about the education system in Finland? They had it was very average about 20, 30 years ago. It was a very average education system in terms of the world rankings performance. It was below the United States and probably below the UK. and they basically had a big overhaul and banned homework, basically, and completely turned it on its head in terms of the way the day was structured,
Right.
and did more, what would you call it, practical-based learning and things like that. And they're now got the most successful education system in the world, basically,
Right.
because they just got rid of the old way of doing things, and they just built it sort of to the, based on the modern learning child, So yeah, it's worth checking that out. But
yeah, absolutely.
so to talk us through the journey with the initial piece of setting it up, it was probably just you and Simon, and where you are now, and all the bits in between.
Yeah, sure. So Simon's previous business, he had several projects on the go, but he did have, if you like, a small handle in international education. And he had a team in Ecuador who helped students find relevant study abroad, help them find and understand what degree is the right degree to study for international students, where they're eligible to study, etc. And we've maintained that team. So we've been very fortunate in that we already have a lot of learnings and experience within the business because of this team in Ecuador, who've been helping students for several years understand where and how they can study abroad. And what we've done in the UK is build up an operations team in Cirencester to help effectively help drive more students. Sorry, phrasing that badly. The operations team is there to help students through the process of understanding not only where they want to study, but where they're eligible to study, because there's so much criteria involved. Your qualifications, your funding available, your lifestyle choices, what do you want to do when you're actually living in the country, perhaps distance, etc., etc.
And what about language is surely a big one as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we only deal with language degrees taught in English.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I mean, it's a factor. Do they want to learn a foreign language, etc.? So one of the big things or problems that we're trying to solve is helping students quickly understand how the process works, what and where they're eligible to study, and then what the next steps are. And so what we're focusing on now over the next year are innovative ways in helping students work that out. There's we do have competitors, obviously, who are in this space. They're all approaching it from a slightly different angle. What we're going to be doing is something rather different. By the end of this quarter, we'll be launching a solution which is very much first to market. And it's a new way for students to understand what programs are most relevant for them. And going beyond that and helping them understand which programs might have been slightly out of their current focus but might still be relevant. So, I mean, little things like, I want to study in Australia. Why do you want to study there? Well, because of the lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. Well, there are other countries who have quite a similar lifestyle. Why don't you consider these? And that's just one example. And there are so many, and when you multiply them up, it gets quite overwhelming. So what you need is a way to convey that information to users in a really, really simple format so they can understand what matches well, what doesn't match so well. And that's our key focus over the next couple of months. So just to give you an example.
No, that's great.
And believe it or not, it's an unusual one.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anybody else doing something like this?
We haven't got any competitors who have a large team who are helping students internationally over the phone as well as through an online process.
Yeah, because there is another element to your business as well, or another element to your brand, which is your corporate social responsibility strategy. And also you've got a goal to plant 1 million trees, haven't you? Which sounds really ambitious but exciting. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, really exciting. So clearly we're passionate about international education, but in our discussions over the past year, we've always touched on this elephant in the room. It's a wonderful thing, but geez, look at the carbon footprint of international travel for students. And looking into it, on average, a student will take 4 flights a year, 2 return flights, to and from their place of study, over an average of 3 years. That's 12 flights in a 3-year period. So what we wanted to do is help do something about it. And we know what we're doing is not the perfect solution by any stretch, but it's a stepping stone towards doing something rather than nothing. So what we're doing is compensating for all their flights whilst they are a student in international study. So anybody who uses our service and enrolls at a university through our service, we will pledge to plant trees to compensate all of their flights as an international student.
Wow.
And so as part of that, we're aiming within 3 to 4 years, hopefully, to plant 1 million trees off the back of compensating those students' flights. So a punchy target, but one we're really excited about.
Do you know roughly where you are now?
Oh, we're near the start. Ask me in a year's time.
Yeah.
But I genuinely believe we can achieve it.
Yeah,
it's not bonkers figures. If we hit our targets, we will be there.
Yeah.
And then in addition to, we're calling that trees for degrees. I love that phrase. I didn't come up with it, but lovely and snappy. In addition to that, we've got a few other initiatives. One being that we're creating our own scholarship fund. So every time a student enrolls through us, we donate a pot of cash into a scholarship fund. And then initially we're working with a charity called Prospect Burma, and they help students in Burma study abroad. And we'll be donating our fund to fully fund X number of students, depending on how large the fund is at the end of each year. And the reason we chose that charity was because they don't just focus on helping that one individual, they focus on helping students that they know are going to come back to the country, to the community, and then have a massive impact. So it's beyond just the value of one individual. That international education and training and is helping beyond the one person.
Of course.
And it's going back into the community and helping hundreds, if not thousands, of others.
Yeah, potential really exponential economic value from from those people. And
it's a really exciting
and
charity.
somewhere like Burma probably needs that, doesn't it?
100%.
So let's talk about the technology you've implemented and put in place then in order for you to scale this.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of technologies are you using, and what technology challenges have you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, well, I'd say the technology we're putting in place, because I wouldn't say we're there yet. It's very much a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
The ins and outs of the technology we're using, I'm probably not the best person to talk about the actual specifics. But the biggest challenge we face is scalability. I mean, if we're going to have even 1,000 universities on the website, which we aim to have within a year, that's over 100,000 programs. Scale that up to 10,000 universities, and you've got a large number of programs, and a lot of data surrounding that. All the modules, throw into the mix details about the universities, the students, etc. We're playing with a vast amount of information. So making sure that the site is scalable is absolutely key, because it doesn't just have to be a fast website. It needs to be fast on the back end, so that when students log into their accounts and make changes, as do our advisors, that stuff is reflected across the board. And I know we don't have anywhere near the same challenges as the likes of Facebook, but you can't just throw up an AWS instance. You've got to really plan and think about this sort of stuff and where the issues are, what's going on.
Yeah, make the necessary changes in real time. I think
exactly.
That's the thing, isn't it? So just wanted to finish off on the future part in terms of like where you see yourself going and stuff. But what I'm really keen to get a handle on is your bigger purpose. Okay, so beyond the 3-year plan, what would you like the legacy of the business to be, and how would you like it to change the higher education situation in the UK?
We want international education to be accessible to as many people as possible. And we believe that the part we're playing in that is to make it as easy as possible to both understand how the process works, but then also make the process as simple as possible. So I think we have a part to play in making more and more people aware of the opportunities of international education, and we also have a part to play in actually making it simple as possible so people don't get scared off. I mean, this industry is so exciting from a technical perspective because it's so screwed. It's so screwed in terms of everybody is using different standards and processes. You go to every single university has got a different way of presenting data. They've got different ways of applying. Use this common form, use our form, use this PDF, apply through this third party.
Yeah.
Nothing's unified. Processes for applying for visas are complex. They all vary. The holy grail is to try and create a common standard across the globe so people can understand what it is they need to do. And if they want to apply for 6 universities, they can follow the same process on our site for all 6, and then we do all the heavy lifting for them. And by doing that, it's going to make it ultimately more accessible for individuals. So the more people who have an easy route into international education, the better. That's all we're after.
Certainly. Okay, so wanted to ask you then, Chris, you've obviously been a very successful entrepreneur. You've got an amazing new venture now. You've obviously been there and done it before with the previous organisation. What advice would you give to a young entrepreneur?
I would probably step back to something I mentioned earlier in our chat, and that is work backwards. What is it? What problem are you trying to solve? That's your starting point. And then work backwards and understand what it is you need to put in place to make that a reality, and just make that stepping stones. It's a big task, but I don't think you need to create a 20-page business plan. There's some brilliant one-page business plans out there, and what they do is just make you think about all the different areas of consideration. Because I think one of the dangers, or one of the mistakes that a lot of us make, is that you go into product mode and you start thinking about the solution rather than thinking about the underlying problems. And you focus on the solution and the solution and the solution, and all that other stuff gets forgotten. And the stuff being, well, what team do I need? What skills do I need in the business? How am I going to fund it? How am I going to grow? How am I going to market it? How am I going to scale it? And a lot of these things often get fallen by the wayside, and we'll get to that. And it's all about what's the website going to do? What's the app going to do? And it's so much more than that, and you've got to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
And I think the other one is check in on yourself that you're enjoying what you're doing. Because it's so, and this doesn't just relate to starting up a business, this relates to any career. I think it's so easy to be in any role and you kind of tick along, especially if it's okay and you don't hate it, but you kind of just tick along and you're not learning anything new really.
Yeah.
It's easy, it's safe. But if you actually take a step back and think, am I really being challenged here?
Yeah,
what do I actually want out of my career? Is it going to help me actually get to where I want to be? I think probably 7, 8, 9 times out of 10, you'd kind of go, oh, geez, I really shouldn't be sticking around doing this, or I should change direction.
I think mediocrity is quite attractive to some people, isn't it? To most people probably.
Yeah.
Because there's not, you're not challenging yourself, you're not out of your comfort zone. It's a slippery slope, and once you're in there, it's difficult to get out of it, isn't it? It
is. But I mean, even as an entrepreneur, and I would say generally an entrepreneur, will have a lot of drive, because that's a key ingredient, right? But even as an entrepreneur, it's easy as the years progress within a business to end up doing something that you don't really enjoy. And I can give you an example of where I ended up, and that was, as CEO, I became more of a CEO. And that sounds silly, but what I mean is I ended up doing less and less, and then nothing in terms of involvement in the product. And I realised that's what I love. I really enjoy being involved in the product. And so I spent, a year, perhaps even 2 years at Money, where I wasn't involved in the product, and this was at the end, and enjoying it less. And it was a really good reflection and learning for when I started Studee, because I decided, right, I'm going to, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, and I'm not ignorant or arrogant enough to think that there aren't people who can do this better than me, but I want to be involved in the product, in creating the product, coming up with ideas, understanding what users want, as well as doing the classic CEO stuff. So that's what I do now.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that you reflect on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can end up just ticking along. And what's the point in doing something if you don't enjoy it?
No, absolutely. And do you know what? I was listening to I went to a talk yesterday with the ex-chief executive of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, Kevin Green, and he was talking about how he'd been to a seminar with Alex Ferguson and how they basically used to double down on what people are good at when he was managing his teams and sort of not bother too much about the stuff that they're not good at. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he used an example, there's a book on Tiger Woods who was terrible at bunker shots and was really good on the green and the fairway, for example. And he was working with his coach practicing bunker shots all the time, didn't really improve that much. So he worked with a new coach and they flipped it on his head and he just focused on what he was good at and left the bunker shots, for like 10% of the time. And then he won more majors than he'd ever won because he was focusing on what he was good at and he didn't go in the bunker very often.
Interesting.
So just focus on what you're good at and double down on it because you'll probably get better. Whereas the stuff you're not so good at, you may not get better because you're not really clearly not passionate.
I've not heard that. Okay.
I'll have to try and dig out the book he was talking about. There's a book about it, Upside Down Management or something it's called. But anyway, so let's finish on this one because it's a good segue into my final question. What book, or story or anecdote or TED Talk has inspired you or as something that you've thought has been a really good lesson for you?
Wow, yeah, I get through a lot of business books. I cheat, I listen to them. So I say I read a lot of books. I don't
think that's cheating.
That's
how everyone consumes business books these days.
Yeah, maybe. There's a couple that stick in my mind. One is Seth Godin, Purple Cow. I'm sure most of us have read it, but that has stuck with me through the years. Creating something that's remarkable is such a key message. I love it. So that has been a core thread of everything I think about since I read it. And another book that I absolutely loved reading / listening to and gave me unique insight is Predictably Irrational.
I've heard of this one. Yeah.
My God, it's just, John, it'll come back to me. I've completely forgotten the author's name. Perhaps you can look it up. But it's all about behavioural psychology, why we do the weird things that we do and how that links into marketing and so on. That is a wonderful book, massively insightful. Ariely, is that right? Oh.
Ariely, excuse me. No, I was actually
surname.
I was actually looking for the Tiger Woods one. Ariely. No,
I think it might be Dan Ariely, but I might have that wrong.
Is the name of the author, is it? Okay.
But Predictably Irrational, it's a wonderful book.
I've heard of that book. I think it was recommended by a management consultant who I went for a talk with, but I never got it. It's one of those ones I wrote down but never got around to reading it. But I'll have to check that out for sure. And Purple Cow is a brilliant book. And do you know what? It's funny you should say that because I think so that's really interesting.
I'm a big fan of Blinkist. And
as a
shortcut for them working out which books to dive into.
Yeah, because he's signed up for them now and does little anecdotes every day, doesn't he? So he's obviously got shares in Blinkist then. Well, thank you for your time, Chris. This has been really insightful. I think it's it sounds like you've got a really good endeavour going on here.
Thank you.
There's a real social responsibility and sustainability element to it as well, which I think is fantastic. So, we really appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Thank you, much appreciated. Cheers.